Good morning. My name is Susan Haney, and I'm glad to be with you here today for another story about some women from the Old Testament. Today, I'd like to start the story of Naomi and Ruth. This is going to be a multi-parter because there's an awful lot that we can learn from Naomi and from Ruth as a part of this story, and I don't want to cut any of it short. So, in our first section, we're going to find out the basics and the beginning of this story. So, let's begin. Naomi is a woman from Bethlehem. Her name means sweet. And she is married to a man named Elimelech. So they both are Israelites and they both live in that vicinity of Judah around Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is a very barren place. It's a desert, in the middle of a desert. They have flocks there. I've seen them, and I wonder how in the world they find enough food to eat to keep their flocks alive. But they do. They do. Naomi and Elimelech have at least two children, two sons. One's name is Malon, and the other is Kilion. That's probably not the way you've heard those pronounced before. Malon and Chilion. I don't remember which one means what, but one of those names means sickness, and the other name means destruction. I'm thinking that those are not the actual names that Naomi and Elimelech gave their sons when they were born. I think that perhaps the names that are used in this story are used as sort of a foreshadowing that things are not going to be wonderful for this family. Things are going to happen. And they do. Because Bethlehem is such a barren area, it's not uncommon for those people to have famine. There's a cycle of plenty to famine and famine to plenty, back and forth. It becomes so bad that Elimelech decides to move his family across the Jordan River to Moab. If you watched last week, you know where Moab comes from. Those people trace their lineage to the incestuous relationship between Lot and one of his daughters. The Israelites did not associate generally with people from Moab. They were prejudiced. It's a thing that we very much can understand in this day and time in the world that we live in. But he moved there because he was desperate for food. While they were in Moab, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi a widow, which is a difficult position to be in at any time in history. But at least she still had her two sons who could take care of her, because a widow needed someone to take care of her. While they are there, and after Elimelech dies, at least that's the way it looks when you read the story in the first chapter of Ruth, Mahlon and Kilion marry two Moabite women. Now, this is before, maybe it's before all of the warnings about marrying women who are not Israelite. Maybe not. There's always been a problem, marry from your own culture or marry from your own people. Another thing that many of us can understand, if not from the world today, at least from the world that we grew up in. So the two young men, the two sons, marry these two women who were from Moab. One is named Ruth, and the other is named Orpah. Neither of these women have children. This is, again, a very difficult situation because not having children is seen as something that is a sign of God's displeasure. And if you don't have children, then you don't have anybody to take care of you. That's an issue today, too. And unfortunately, sickness and destruction also die in the land of Moab. Now we have three women who are in a very difficult situation. There's a reason why so many times in the Old and the New Testament we are admonished to look after orphans and widows because they are totally alone. They have no one to support them. They're desperately poor. They are hungry. They may not even have a place to live. It's a bad situation. So these three women are in a bad situation. At least they're together, but they are in a bad situation. they find that there is more food back in Judah. Now, I doubt seriously that Naomi could go back and live with her daddy, which is what you usually would do if you were widowed. I imagine that perhaps her parents are gone, and she's simply going back to Judah because she does have some family there who might help her. She decides that she's going to return, and she tells her daughters-in-law that both of them should go back to their families. Again, that's what you do. You go back to your daddy's house. You become an old maid aunt. And if you're able to be married off, again, well, you're very lucky. And that's where I'm going to leave the story for today. Because we should all be aware of the things that go on around us that signify our prejudice, and understand how those things relate to the way that we relate to the world. We'll look next week at how Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah navigate the world to come as single women in a world that doesn't have a place for a single woman. I hope that you have a great weekend. I hope that you don't sweat to death today. And I will look forward to seeing some of you again next Thursday when we continue the story of Naomi and Ruth. Bye-bye now.